Hello, everybody. Good morning. Well, I got it started. I am John Cirone. Welcome to how Microsoft's transforming communications and executive employee engagement. I've been at Microsoft for 32 years, so quite a long time. I've been here from the Bill Gates era to the Satya era currently. I've been in comms for the last probably 15 years, and I'm a comms person kind of through and through. So my talk today is all about how Microsoft is sort of transforming our approach to communications and changing through tools like Viva Engage and otherwise kind of how we engage with employees broadly. So before I get into slide view here, I thought I would start with a little bit of a quiz for you all. My first year was 91. So how do you think Microsoft reached employees back in 91 through our communications? Any guesses?
Carrier pigeons.
Carrier pigeons?
Paper pillow.
Good guess. Anybody else? It was pre-internet days when I started. This is right. The number one channel was the printed micronews newsletter, which came to your mailbox every Friday afternoon. And the best part of it was the 8-page classified ads, where you could find like every cool gadget and car and overpriced item from Microsoft's developer audience in that space. So it was the micronews. It was an annual company meeting at the Mariners baseball stadium that was once a year. That was like a 6-hour PowerPoint slide, like pep rally with bands and a celebrity host. And then it was managers, right? I think my first day there were 8,235 employees at Microsoft. So it was big, but still small relative to today's standards. And a lot of our culture and comms happened kind of organically. So change does sometimes take time, and change can be super quick at times. Over the long haul, change does always happen, and you can see in this sort of talk today how change has happened over the last 32 years, certainly. So I thought I would start with this slide to give you a little bit of context around the size and the scale of the company. I think it's important to understand that, to sort of understand our approach to how we manage communications. We have about 200,000 employees at Microsoft currently. Those are FTEs. We have another large number of folks who are contract staff as well. There are 28,000 Microsoft managers worldwide, and there are almost 400 senior executives. Think of those as like your company vice presidents, your EVPs, whatnot, and of course our CEO and his 14 or 15 directs. And the reason why I start with that slide and those numbers is because when you look at sort of what are the channels that influence employee perceptions, this slide speaks to the sort of the last 10 years of change at Microsoft. So back in 2013, which was Steve Ballmer's last year as CEO of Microsoft, it's a real mix of external and internal channels, right? Which is true for any company, and it's true for Microsoft today. You're always going to have that dynamic of internal is external and external is internal. But in 2013, the number one channel that employees got information from was outside press coverage. Now, I don't care how great your company is and how high you are on your arc of your sort of company narrative. That's never a great dynamic to allow the press to be your number one driver of employee perceptions. And at the time, it wasn't the best year for Microsoft, so that was like a double whammy for us. And then amongst the other 9 or top 10 channels, it's a real mix, right? There's the stock price, there's analyst reports, there's family and friends, a lot of outside influences. By contrast, today, it really is internal driving those employee perceptions. And the top 7 channels here are all internal, and they're led by the voice of the CEO, which is Satya Nadella, right? Those 400 or so Microsoft senior leaders, and those 28,000 Microsoft managers. So if you're in charge of sort of communications at Microsoft and how to resource communications, and you see this data, then you want to think, is my comm staff supporting the channels that have the most influence? And ironically, in the story of how comms and most companies evolve over time, it's kind of like a house remodel, right? You don't sort of just wipe things out one day, typically, and rebuild from the ground up. You sort of make change over time. So I would say even about 6 years ago or so, if you were to ask me, how does Microsoft manage comms, and do you have a way of reaching all of your senior leaders and their comm staff? We simply didn't, right? We had a world that was sort of centralized around media relations, and then we have a lot of exec comms folks that are attached to leaders sitting somewhere at the company, but they don't belong to the central comms group, and therefore don't get access to centralized messaging and the company narrative. So if you're trying to drive a one Microsoft message, that was very difficult to do when you don't sort of have all those folks together. So we, about 5 years ago, created this thing called GEEC, which is the core of my job. It is the Global Executive and Employee Communications Community. Think of it as a community, right? All these words are chosen very intentionally. It's a community of folks across the company that are doing executive comms and employee comms work on behalf of those 400 or so senior leaders. And so, the average senior leader probably has one FTE doing their comms. Some have a couple more if their scope and scale can be quite big. We have Microsoft leaders that have orgs of 55,000 people and some that have orgs of like 400 people, right? So the range is huge and the range of lines of business is big. It's Xbox to Azure and Copilot, et cetera. So it's quite a diverse audience. And the folks that are in these roles are doing both internal comms and external comms. So internal comms is going to be stuff like, culture communications, D&I communications, intranet sites, all hands meetings, ask me anythings. On the external side, stuff like customer and partner meetings, some media relations work with our media team, the external social work on LinkedIn and X and other platforms and that kind of thing. So it's a real sort of range of work across both internal and external. The other thing I sort of have to mention here is that I mentioned before that change sometimes takes time and sometimes change is quick. The pandemic was one of those things that affected all of us and drove a lot of change very rapidly, right? And it's hard to look at the evolution of comms at any company and not talk about the effect of the pandemic and the effect of hybrid work on just how companies communicate. At Microsoft, prior to the pandemic, about 75% of our teams were co-located, which means they were located in the same space, right? And today, by contrast, it's about 25%. So it's a huge shift in terms of where people are working from and how they get together. And in today's model, like on my team, for example, most of my team, half of them live in different states from me. We get together twice a year in person, but otherwise everything is virtual, right? And that's, that wasn't the way we did work probably 3 to 4 years ago. So, and we'll talk about kind of the impact of the pandemic on how we manage comms. And you can see that, I think, simply in the channels that we are now leaning into. This is a look at the primary channels that any leader at Microsoft would typically use to manage their communications. Now, leaders are diverse. They have, again, different size orgs and different scopes in different countries, different locations. They also have very different styles, right? Some leaders are very uncomfortable in social platforms. Some love to be on stage like this. Some prefer written communications. Some do their own written comms. Some hire staff that for them the range is quite big. So the range of channels reflects that. And there's never one channel to reach all employees either, right? So any leader has to use a variety of channels to reach their audience. So, and I'll walk through some of these in a bit, but the mix includes everything from your classic all hands town hall events. The evolution of that is what we call the AMA, which is Ask Me Anything events. Viva Engage, we'll dive into in quite a bit in a minute as well, as a big platform for us. We're also much more embracing of leaders and employees being on social platforms than we used to be through tools like LinkedIn My Company and LinkedIn itself and X and otherwise. We still send plenty of email, even though I'll talk badly about it today. We still love our email. We use Teams all the time. We use Viva Connections, and then we have an intranet site called MSW and lots of intranet sites internally. So we use a wide range of platforms. I mentioned earlier, we do a survey. We do lots of surveys at Microsoft. We love our data. But one of the surveys that we like in comms is our annual communication survey that goes to about half of Microsoft. And one of the questions is around channel preferences. And so this year we thought this is a pretty insightful slide. When you asked employees, what are the channels that you prefer to hear from leaders from, town halls are still the #1 most preferred channel. Town halls have been around my entire Microsoft career, and so I would expect them to be rather high. And they're also, I think, super important platforms in a world where teams are dispersed. But the two tools that are sort of have the most increase in preference year over year are Viva Engage and AMAs, right? Everything else on this list, town halls, email from leaders, and SharePoint sites are declining. Now, why are those two increasing? It's because those are the two channels that are the best enabling two-way conversation. And if I leave it with kind of one principle that I think is driving the change in our approach to comms at Microsoft, it is the idea of two-way dialogue, right? And I'm being overly simplistic here, but if you look at like the previous models of all hands and email and SharePoint sites, those are traditionally one-way comms channels, right? It's the leader, sending a message out in email to all the employees in the org. The employees receive the email. They may answer one-off and have questions, but a lot of it is not very transparent, and it's meant to enable kind of, broad dissemination. Tools like AMAs and Viva Engage are the opposite. They're supposed to be about having conversations, allowing questions, creating an environment that sort of embraces the idea of a back and forth dialogue. So we're seeing a real increase in both of those channels. And we'll talk a bit about how do you make that shift, because you can't do that overnight. You can't move from an email world and a SharePoint world into a world that embraces two-way dialogue without a lot of intentionality behind your choices. The other piece that's important in having a two-way dialogue is listening, right? You can't have dialogue without listening to what your employees are thinking and trying to respond to them at scale. So this is a view of what we call our employee listening system. Almost any company has some version of this. Typically, HR drives the approach to employee listening, and that's true at Microsoft. And so on the left part of the slide, what you're seeing in the blue circles are more of the traditional, like quantitative survey tools that HR drives through tools and platforms like Glint, right? These are things like at Microsoft, we call it our employee signal survey. That's our twice-a-year survey that goes to every employee in the company, and about 85% of employees take that survey. We have a daily survey that goes to a couple thousand employees a day, which is great for tracking kind of change over time. We love that sort of for our CEO comms in particular. And there are lots of kind of one-off surveys on different programs, whether it's communications or benefits or real estate and facilities, or name your topic. On the right part of the slide are more of your ambient channels, right? Your social listening tools. What are employees talking about on social platforms like Viva Engage, like Glassdoor, Blind, some of the external channels? What are you seeing in Viva Insights? For example, what are you getting in our case from our Ask HR alias, et cetera? And all of that kind of comes together to give a comms person and an HR person and a leader or a chief of staff a pretty good view of how employees are feeling about an organization or the culture or what's happening in a certain environment, which is super important for a comms approach. So, and we are a growth mindset culture at Microsoft at our core, which means we value kind of learning and listening. So as simple as it sounds to say, I want to hear from you, I value your feedback, putting in place a tool like this and this kind of an approach takes a lot of intentionality, right, and a lot of work on behalf of a variety of folks across HR and comms. So that's sort of our approach from a philosophical level. What does it look like in practicality? I thought I would walk you through our CEO comms approach and how Satya and his team take all those sort of principles and ideas and put them into place through the channels that he uses. We're lucky at Microsoft to have a CEO who is a natural and authentic, great communicator. He's a very inspiring communicator. He believes in the importance of communications. When he became CEO back in 2014, we had a big town hall that had Bill Gates and Steve and Satya all on stage together. It was a big kind of moment for the company. We've had 2 CEO changes in our 50-year history, so it doesn't happen very often. And when he got up on stage and talked to employees for the first time, one of the first things he said to employees was, I want to change the soul of Microsoft. And to change the soul of this company, it will take us time, and it will take having a conversation with you over time. So I'm committing to having a monthly town hall with you where I'm going to be answering your questions, and we're going to talk about the company mission, the company culture, and the company strategy. And so that kind of began, our 10-year sort of culture change journey. If you follow the story of Microsoft, if you're a fan of the company, then I think you've seen kind of the credit Microsoft has gotten for its last 10-year transformation. And if you look at why that's happened, culture is a huge part of that. And a lot of that goes back to, I think the CEO's belief in the importance of taking employees on that journey and driving change over time. So these are the channels that he currently uses. I mentioned before that you always live in this world that's part external and part internal, and that's true for his communications. There are a couple of channels here, the LinkedIn, kind of Twitter, X social platforms, as well as his external keynotes that are sort of outside comms that many employees are going to see or receive or take part in. So we go to great lengths to make sure that for his 3 big keynotes a year, which are at events like Microsoft Build, which is actually later on this month, that every employee has a calendar invite to join Satya to watch that keynote for 90 minutes on May 21st this year. And we do a lot of work to promote the content of what he talks about at that strategy talk and at that keynote. Secondly, some employees, not all, will follow him on social platforms. So we do a lot of work to amplify his posts on our intranet and make sure that employees who do follow him are seeing that important content. So that's part of his mix. You may be surprised to know that he almost never sends emails. He probably sends maybe 2 all-company emails a year. They are always about an important news event, like a big change in our senior leadership. There's a big news event, we're going to acquire a company or something like that that might rise to the level of being an all-company email. But otherwise, there's no sort of rhythm of quarterly emails or kind of an annual priorities mail or nothing like that. He really kind of relies on the first 2 boxes up here, which are the Viva Engage platform and the company strategy series to be his 2 primary channels. And we'll talk a little bit about each in a minute. But both of those are, the Strat series think of that as a town hall-like program with a bunch of modifications, and Viva Engage we'll get into in a second. And the reason why he uses those channels, well, there are many reasons, but one of the insights from my annual comms survey is around what drives satisfaction with a leader's communications. And this is what drives satisfaction with Satya's. And this actually is true for most of our leaders. There are lots of things that influence satisfaction. There's things like, are the leaders' comms clear? Are they concise? Does the leader create an environment that values feedback? Do they communicate frequently enough to the organization? But in this case, the number one driver is, does Satya address topics that I care about in a timely manner, right? And so what do they care about? And is it timely? So when you're looking for the channels that solve for that, you're looking for channels that allow for those types of things. What can reach employees in a timely fashion? An annual company meeting doesn't, right? That's a once a year moment. And what they care about means, what are they talking about? So channels that have a listening component are going to be key there. So that kind of insight was key for us to look at where should he invest his time, right? Like any CEO, they're very busy. You only get so much of their time dedicated to doing exec and employee comms. So you got to make the most use of that time. So let's talk about the company strategy series, because this is, I think, one of the more traditional things that he does, but with a few sort of, I think, interesting pivots. So any company does town halls. That's not a new idea, and I'm not here to just talk about it being an evolutionary idea here. But how he does this, I think, is just pretty interesting. So I mentioned before, when he became CEO in 2014, he committed to doing a monthly town hall. That town hall was about 45 minutes. The typical town hall would have been maybe 10 minutes of him just sharing top of mind thoughts. And then it would have been all Q&A that was moderated by an employee called our Yambassador, a takeoff on Yammer, if you were a fan of Yammer. And so the event was really oriented towards embracing the idea of answering employee questions. This is all pre-pandemic, so a lot of those questions came from microphones in the room for the people that were in the live audience in the room, and then some would come online for Yammer. And that format served him well for quite a while because it feels like a very open and transparent way of talking to employees. You're seeing the questions, you're hearing them, and he's answering the questions kind of live in this event. Once you get to the pandemic and everything moves to being virtual, and a lot of questions would be pre-submitted and are therefore sort of curated and pre-scripted, events like this tend to lose their authenticity and they become quite repetitive because the questions tend to be the same themes over and over again. What is our approach to hybrid work? What are our thoughts on compensation for the company? More currently, what are our thoughts on the war in the Middle East? Those kinds of topics. And so those are fine to answer once in a while, but when they become the same questions over and over again, fatigue kind of sets in. And so we, about 2 years ago, decided to scrap our approach to town halls and instead replace it with an event called the Company Strategy Series that we felt would allow us to better focus on the company strategy, which employees wanted to hear more about, and allow him to address top-of-mind thoughts and comments from employees. So now those events are also still live in person for him and also online. The first 15 minutes are basically all of him answering the top themes from the employee listening system. So he'll open up and he'll share a couple top-of-mind thoughts, and then he'll say, in the month of April, we heard a lot of questions from you, but the top 3 themes were A, B, and C. Let me speak to each of those things. And he'll spend 5 minutes per theme talking about those things. What we like about that model is that it's not a John's got a question and then CEO has to answer it. It's a broader view, right? It's here is the theme that we're seeing. There's multi-dimensions to the theme. Let me talk about the theme more broadly. And then the last half of the event is about one element of our company strategy, whether it's AI, whether it's gaming. You choose kind of the theme of the month and you bring up a senior leader, and he and Satya engage in a discussion around that part of our strategy. So that format works well for him. It allows him to both address, again, top-of-mind issues, but also get to kind of the core of the company and our transformation and the company strategy. And all of that takes place on Viva Engage, so we're seeing a lot of real-time conversations. We're getting kind of instant analytics off of the event, both from stream and the viewership, and then Engage in terms of just questions and people seeing the content. We probably get equal views, both live and on demand. So if we get maybe 25,000 people tuning in live, we'll get a similar number watching on demand. So the on-demand component is as important as the live experience, and we do a lot of work to package up that content later on and make things snackable and use all of our different channels from the intranet to email to Engage to push that content out to employees. So that's our approach to the Strat series and town halls. I mentioned the other core channel for him is Viva Engage. And so I think you've seen a lot of that if you've been to other sessions on this conference. I won't go through a bunch of demos here for you. I'll just talk about how we think about it from the comm side, right? Because I'm not part of the Viva team. I'm not part of IT. I'm part of the communications team. So the questions that I ask and the things I'm curious about are things that are coming from the communications lens, not from the lens of IT or the product team. So, when you're trying to drive change in a company in terms of how you communicate, you just can't snap your fingers and you can't make everything change overnight. You have to move leaders, you have to move employees, you have to move IT, kind of all on the journey with you. And so we've been trying for years at Microsoft to kind of land Yammer as a place for employees to go with leaders and have a conversation. And we just couldn't, as an enterprise-wide company, get that done. There were pockets you would see in different orgs that would move on to Yammer if the leader was super committed. But as an enterprise-wide platform, we just couldn't get that platform to take off. I think, and this is my view, but Yammer was pitched as being a great place to build community, not as a place to go to drive leader and employee connection. So it met some needs, but it wasn't a critical place to go as an employee to get information. So we made a bet a couple years ago, kind of coming 2 years post-pandemic, that we needed to lean more into these kinds of platforms, because the reality was employees were living in teams now. I know employees that are half of my age or younger that never use their email. They only go to Teams. So if you're going to use email, you're never going to reach them. So sort of with all those things to consider, we sort of put the stake in the ground with our head of comms for the company and said, we are going to ask every single leader to start committing to two-way dialogue as of today. And the way they do that might vary given their preferences and their channels and their organization scopes and scales, but the principle is the same. Like two-way dialogue is how we reach employees at Microsoft. So at the enterprise space, which is the space that I work in, right, global employee comms, we had the same discussion. So we had used email for years. How do you reach employees? An all-company email was the holy grail of the employee comm space, right? And my team controls all the permissions for that tool and all the different admin features and whatnot. So with Engage, we basically went through the same exercise. Okay, well, how do you have an all-company post in Engage? What are some of the things you have to do? You've got to have the permissions in place. You can't allow every employee to reply all to an all-company post in Engage. What are the kinds of things that deserve an all-company email? Same thing here, right? What are the kinds of things that deserve an all-company post in Viva Engage? And so we found these 3 examples to be, we think, high-value scenarios for when Engage works well for enterprise-wide global comms, right? The first one is announcing news or key moments, right? We have an endless stream of news at Microsoft that we're trying to push out to employees, and we're trying to find ways to prioritize certain news beats. So, right, so when we have a big news day, we'll partner up with the leader that runs that sort of piece of news or that part of the company, and we'll have them post on Viva Engage, right? Today we're announcing Copilot Pro, or today we announced our ad for the Super Bowl, and they can give some context, they can include the videos and the visuals, and instantly you're seeing the reactions, the likes, the hearts, the thumbs up, you're seeing the questions, you're seeing the comments. It's so much more interesting and engaging than an email would have been, right? Because in an email, you don't see all of that. That all happens kind of just one-off behind the scenes. So we love it for those kinds of moments, and we do that all the time, and that happens in a group we call Employee News and Events that's locked down to only FTEs. Only leaders can post in that group. The average employee can't post. The average employee can only like and share and comment and engage in those posts. So that controls the feed. My team controls who can post there, just like with email. So all the same rules and things I care about as a comms person are still true here as they are in email. The second example is that in the D&I space, right? We love to sort of, as all companies do, we embrace diversity and inclusion. We celebrate these cultural heritage moments. It's Gay Pride Month in June, it's Black History Month. Well, leaders love to amplify those things. Engage is a great way to celebrate those moments in an open and transparent way and allow employees to join in the celebrations and share their support and see leaders kind of amplifying those moments. And so that's a great way to kind of to reinforce the importance of D&I in any company. And that's a critical piece of Microsoft's culture, certainly. And then lastly, we have lots of events for employees. We have our company strat series. We have the event you're seeing here called Discover Day, which is a whole day about career development. We have ERG Engage, a whole day about D&I and inclusion and diversity. This is a great place to post all company event information, encourage employees to take part in these things, right? This replaces the old all company email that would have said, come tomorrow for Discover Days and kind of check this out. And so we are actively moving our comms off of email into Engage, which gives us interactivity, analytics, a better sense of sentiment, the questions, like all those things that a comms person loves to know and typically wouldn't know any of that through a tool like email. And so these are all some of the great ways we love using the community as part of Viva Engage. The other big part of Engage is leaders, right? How do you amplify leaders' messages to their organizations and to their followers? So through the storyline feature in Engage, a lot of our leaders will post on their storylines that allows any employee in their organization or who follows them to see their content. And here's a few examples of how we think some leaders are using that well. In the case of Satya, I mentioned before, his time is limited to do communications. But the reality is he does a lot of comms that most employees never see. So he was in India, and I think about a month and a half ago on a big work trip, talking to customers and partners. When he was there, he did a One India town hall, and then his team on Viva Engage posted and said, I was in India all last week talking to customers and partners. As part of my visit, I joined the employees of India for One India town hall. We had a great discussion about AI. I wanted to share that with all of the rest of you. So now all of a sudden, content that was seen by maybe 10,000 employees is now seen by the whole company. Right? It's a great way to extend the reach of things that already exist. It's no more time for the CEO. It was maybe 5 minutes time for his comms director to write that paragraph of text and hit post, and then it's out there for the whole company. So we love it for things like that. There are other leaders that do regular updates, like either weekly or monthly. They can be lots of different forms. I see them often as being short videos that someone films on their webcam or their laptop, and they just post and say, hey guys, it's Friday, it's my Friday update, here are my thoughts for the week. And that happens in all kinds of different cadences, but a great way for a leader that has an org that's dispersed over across the world to reach their employees in a nice sort of casual, interactive way. And then lastly, kind of just thought leadership, right? I work for Frank Shaw, who's the head of comms at Microsoft. He has a mail that's called TGIF that he sent for a number of years. It's a thought leadership mail that he sends every Friday morning. He now posts that in Engage quite often for us to go in and kind of see and respond to. So again, these posts are going to both the employees in the org and their followers. So a great way for leaders to kind of extend their profile internally and for employees to hear more from leaders outside of events like an all hands or an AMA. Now, those are a lot of great ways, right, to use Engage, and we love it for all those reasons. I think a lesson that we have learned on our journey within Microsoft around the Engage platform is just like any other social platform, when you work on a platform like this, you have to think about digital safety, right? And so as wonderful as it is to like post, top company news and celebrate different D&I moments and encourage employees to come to events, you also have to create a platform that's safe for them to share and be open and transparent. And I think in our case, we spent, the good part of last year focusing a lot on all the proactive ways, and we didn't spend enough time on this. So when the war in the Middle East happened last October, we kind of got caught flat-footed, right? There are many features in Engage that allow the moderator to do management in the platform that we use and we love, but that wasn't enough. So for example, we had a group on Engage called All Company that was open to any employee on the network. So that was 405,000 people, like all the FTEs and all of the external staff. And any employee could post anything there. So when the war began in the Middle East, all of a sudden there were all these conversations spinning up on this platform that anybody could see that just were not healthy dialogue. And so we had to lock that down almost immediately and say, first of all, we don't need to have a group that every single person on the network can actually post to. Like, we don't allow that in email. Why would you allow that here, right? And so we had to put that into place. We had to think about things like permissions for large groups, for employee news and event, which is all FTEs. What can employees do? What can employees do? Just like with email, right? No different. We had to clarify kind of behaviors around online sort of activity at Microsoft. When you're on email, when you're in Teams, when you're in Engage. Like when you first join the company, you sign this terms of use and you kind of forget about it. So how do you make that visible to more employees when they're in these open platforms to remind them about sort of, professional online behavior in a workplace? You have to monitor and listen, right? I was saying before the importance of listening. And just like a kid's field trip, you got to have a good chaperone or the kids misbehave. The same thing is true here, right? You've got to have people that are watching these communities, that are paying attention, that are responding to good conversations, that are helping to moderate things that are going off the rails in some cases, to move content around to the right places to get employees to where they want to be. You have to have a set of principles to help you determine, when are things in violation of terms of use, what do you allow, which features do you use when, and then you've got to have messaging. So when you have to address things online, because you will, because part of having an open and transparent sort of organization means you have to address some things that are challenging at times. Those are things in our case like compensation, the war in Israel, right? Those are D&I, like workplace culture. Those topics come up in all kinds of different forums for leaders. We have a whole document called Employee Hot Topics that my team manages. So when a leader has an AMA event, which is an Ask Me Anything event, or they're on Engage, we will give their comms lead access to the Hot Topics document where they can get the latest talking points on those topics, right? So that won't solve all of your ills, but at least it ensures that the leader will have something to start with when they have to engage in these more challenging conversations. For all of you who are looking at Engage as a platform, I would encourage you to spend some time in this space, because inevitably this will come up as being an issue for you as you sort of navigate the world of being open and transparent. And then I can't not mention the importance of AI. I think, just like it is for you all, it's a journey for us as well. We started with Engage, I want to say like 18 months ago, and we've come a long way. I think we're working on Amplify now at Microsoft, and we're trying to, in the comm space, different pockets of, where Amplify can work. And I think with Copilot and artificial intelligence, if you saw Steve's keynote yesterday, you saw him talk about a lot of ways that at Microsoft we're trying to evolve our approach to comms with AI, and that's true for employee comms as well. Engage is often leading in many ways here, and they did a great job of encouraging Copilot to be part of the product, and it's a great way for us to kind of pull in the sentiment and data that's so helpful in Engage and use that with Copilot to actually create content. But across all aspects of employee comms, we're looking at the AI sort of evolution and trying to figure out where it's useful, where it's not useful, and how to lean into the space. So I think we're on a journey, as you all are, and I think more to come. And if I'm back here next year, you'll hear more about our artificial intelligence approach to employee executive comms. So with that, I'm going to pause for a bit and turn it over to Q&A. But that is kind of the quick story of how Microsoft's evolving our approach to exec and employee comms. And happy to answer your questions. You're right. The questions around when you're listening, all the comments you get back, Copilot did the work of sort of, I think, analyzing the comments that you're getting and giving you a sense of what's being discussed. It does do some of that work, and Christy, if you have thoughts here, please jump in. So we have a very broad employee listening system. So all the survey work that I mentioned on that one slide, a lot of that data, found the mic, hooray. A lot of that data gets analyzed by an HR analyst team, right? So for the daily signal survey or the employee one, what I get in my inbox every few weeks from them is a report that says, here are the top themes, here are some verbatims, we've analyzed this for you. With Engage, if you go to so when you go to a post and you can see how many views the post had and how many reactions there were, it does automate the sentiment. It gives you a sentiment score, positive, neutral, negative. It'll give you the most engaged threads and the most liked comments and shares. And a lot of that data can be used to then figure out what are employees talking about and what are some of the questions. And their comments, right. Right. Is that right, Christy? Want to add to that? Or Jason?
Yeah,
it's on.
Just to add to that. So one of the capabilities that we have as Engage as well as at the network analytics level, we are able to look at kind of the most engaged, most popular threads across our entire network, and then pull out a set of themes that those conversations are about. And what that enables you to do is go to the analytics page as well and see, oh, this is something a lot of people are talking about. It also has a sentiment associated with it. But this is something a lot of people are talking about. Maybe I should go look into this and dig into this. So it also kind of helps point out those areas that might need some attention. And then what we're looking to do over the next year is advance that so that you can also mark certain things as like, if this topic happens, like I kind of want to be just notified on it so I can take a look and see what's going on. So that's kind of the next step of where we're going to take that from an AI perspective. Yeah.
One of the things we've not solved for yet, though, is how do you take data from lots of channels and bring it together, right? So what he mentioned was sort of the Engage solution. There's still all the stuff from the surveys and other places that's coming elsewhere. So I think part of the challenge we've had is when it comes from 8 different places, how do you bring it all together? That's a big piece of it. Other questions? Yes?
How do you decide what to post on as SharePoint news on the internet versus Viva Engage, articles and all this fun stuff, and like when
Is that?
yeah. So when do you decide what to post as SharePoint news on your internet versus like Viva Engage quick post versus an article? Just curious on that, the logic that goes into that, making the decision.
I would a couple things. So Viva Engage, at the moment, I think we think about as being a channel for leader and employee engagement. So a lot of our view there is leader-led. We have a very long process where we manage the company's global news agenda. So think of that as like air traffic control. What is all the news at Microsoft? And it all goes on one calendar. And then the head of comms and his LT determine what are the key beats that we're trying to amplify broadly, right? We're never going to solve for information overload, but we can at least establish priorities for the company. And so that happens at the very top level. And then once you have that view of the news, then we say, okay, with Viva Engage, what are those key news beats and who are the right leaders to then amplify those messages and stories on Engage? So that's kind of the Engage view. MSW, which is the intranet, which is the SharePoint news kind of story you're talking about, has a slightly different kind of purpose, I guess, at Microsoft. So the intranet is mainly a place employees go to get somewhere else, right? The search feature is essential and it gets huge traffic every month as a place to go somewhere else. While employees are on the MSW homepage, as the CorpCom person, I just think, well, I've got the eyeballs there. I might as well make use of the real estate. So it has a hero grid, like most SharePoint pages do. It has 3 panes typically. And we will program those panes based off of that global news agenda. So back at that very top level again. And so those panes change every day. Typically, sometimes it's the same content for 2 days in a row, but almost never more than 2 days in a row. People think of it as being exciting to be on the homepage of MSW, but the reality is the numbers don't bear that out, right? People just don't go there for information. They're going to Teams, right, which is where they're living now. They use Outlook still for information. So if I'm pushing an article on MSW, I have to push it in some other channel to get eyeballs to that pane. Does that help?
Like publishing something to SharePoint news, but having a leader like amplify it by saying like, hey, this is sort of exciting, we're having this.
Yes. Yep.
Because I see like SharePoint news potentially being my that contract right now. It's like this is almost like a historical point in time. What's like a very objective view of what's happening, right? Like this big end down.
Yep.
But then the sentiment behind it and all of that, like a host of that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I just have a question around the difference between Leadership Corner, I think it is, we don't have the Viva Suite, but we are thinking about getting it, versus having leaders go to their storylines to share their thoughts. I get confused about the both, like what is the best practice for that?
Do you want to get this? I'll let the team actually answer that for you before I jump
I
in.
can take that one. So they work hand in hand. Leadership Corner, despite its name, is not for leaders, it is for employees. And when you go to Leadership Corner, what you're seeing there is a personalized view of what your leaders have shared. The leaders are sharing on their storyline or in communities, but they're your leaders. So it's an aggregator that gives you a feed specifically of things that your leaders have shared on their storylines or communities. So the leader doesn't go to Leadership Corner and post something in a place. They're posting elsewhere, and you as an employee are seeing that roll up. Does that help?
I just have a question about EMA. Can EMA actually be initiated through a Teams live event, or it has to be through just Viva Engage? That's the first question. But
Dan.
also,
Okay.
can the questions be moderated beforehand, before and filtered before they get to the host? But also, can they be anonymous?
Yeah, the great question. You're my new best friend because this is exactly what my team is working on right now. So a live event in Viva Engage has a discussion attached to it that people can go before the event, they can go during the event, and it's that discussion in the live event today is open. Anyone can go post. An AMA today has moderation. It has the option for anonymous, and it's designed to be really a text-only event. So what we have seen our leaders at Microsoft starting to do is they host an AMA up till the moment of the live event, and they get people to submit questions, vote them up and down, perhaps anonymous. They get much higher quality questions with anonymous, but then they turn on moderation for obvious reasons. And so the agreement with employees is I, as a leader, will answer the most upvoted questions. Then during the live event, they actually address the questions that came from the AMA. So they're creating two things, the before and the during. And that's something that we will be bringing closer together in the product over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mentioned before that AMAs are one of the channels that employees are really responding quite well to because they do a great job of allowing leaders to sort of address top of mind issues right, in a very open and sort of quick forum. And there's no one way to do AMAs. Viva Engage offers one way to do them. You also can do them in teams. So like in my world and in comms, Frank Shaw has a twice a year all hands. Think of that as being like your heavily produced 90-minute, a lot of slides, a lot of presenting type content, and a monthly AMA. The monthly AMA is 30 minutes. It's a Teams call, so it's basically free. You just dial in as the employee to the Teams call, and he answers questions in real time. So he may take one question pre-submitted, but all the rest are just coming in the chat or just on camera from somebody in the moment. And employees love that. It's so easy to access. There's like no barrier to entry. They're used to being on Teams calls all day long, so it's incredibly simple. And those questions are not anonymous, right? Because you are in the chat, you're on camera, typically you're asking. But because the form is so sort of informal and specific to the actual team and locked down, people feel relatively comfortable. We used to do questions that were anonymous for Satya. We actually didn't get great content there. We got some. We offered it as a channel for people that wanted to ask maybe a more sensitive question and then were uncomfortable, but we didn't get the volume. So I think it works in some forums, but not in others.
Hi, I have a question. How are you leveraging the featured post feature in Viva Engage? And like, how do you decide what should be a featured post, and like how many featured posts do you usually have running at once?
I may have the wrong term here. What I think about is the announcement feature, which I guess is different than featured post specifically. So when a leader is posting something, of the examples I mentioned earlier, one of the choices the comms lead has to make is, do I make this a post or an announcement? An announcement can trigger an email and a Teams ping for all the employees that receive the message if the sender chooses to do that, right? So if I want to get eyeballs on my post, which is in Corp Comm what I probably care about, then making something an announcement usually is a super important piece of that strategy, right? Because that ensures you'll get the eyeballs. A post is less visible because it won't create that email or that Teams ping, so you have to kind of go to the channel to find it. So that's how I think about sort of making things visible, which I'm guessing is the goal you're driving at. The featured post piece is a different element that actually I don't think about very often. I know, Dan, do you have more thoughts on the role of featured posts?
Yeah, I would say featured posts are helpful in prioritizing a post in the home feed and in the weekly digest that people get. Those are the two places where it will bump it up. And the way featured posts are great if you're controlling how many there are, but if like there's a bunch of people featuring posts, a user's only gonna see one of those in the digest. We will not show more than one featured post. Once they've seen that, the next time they'll see the next. So there's an opportunity for contention with featured posts. So first, they're limited in where they help. There's the opportunity for contention. And we're in the process of looking at the data right now. We're not convinced that having the blue border around it is actually a helpful thing. It might be causing the perception that this is an advertisement and people just skip it. So I would say don't make featured post a hero of your comm strategy. And then the other thing to add to what John said about posts versus announcements is what our data shows is if you send an announcement, it will reach 80% of the audience within 2 to 4 business hours. If you send it as a post, it will reach the same-ish 80% of your audience in 1 to 2 days. So you'll still get the same number of eyeballs. It feels better when it's an announcement because you know it's going directly to them and they're gonna see it right now, but the same people will see it over 1 to 2 days. And then over time, you get the 80 to 95%, as it sort of filters through the system and people see it. But they're equally effective. I would say use announcements for something that is urgent, use posts for something that is less urgent, but you want people to see it. And the real key is you have to have the audience defined that you want to see that thing, the members of that community or the audience in a leader's storyline.
Just one other thing on featured posts is that it does provide the benefit that customers want, and that it does boost the amount of eyeballs that it does get. But to Dan's point, we did some experimentation where we had the featured post as the top thread at the top of the home feed, And what we found is that when it was the top thread, generally people didn't scroll down further in their feed. So what you'll see is that the featured post is actually the second spot in the feed. And we want the first spot to be something that's highly relevant to the user. And then we saw more engagement, more interaction with the home feed. So to what Dan is saying is that it is valuable, but in some cases, a featured post to an end user is like, I don't know what this is. It's not super relevant to me. Sometimes can have the opposite effect on engagement.
Hi, John. Great presentation, first off. You were talking about the intranet and that it's not, not a lot of people, I should say not a lot of people, but it's not as widely used. Do you, with the intranet, are you actually using Viva Connections with that so it's brought into Teams? And do you do all of that at Microsoft?
Yeah, and I should rephrase it. I mean, the intranet is still very important for a lot of other reasons, but if the goal, and it's not a great, we don't get huge numbers of click-throughs on the hero grid, which is the piece that as the CorpCom person I care about. Like search is the reason internet really matters, and which is incredibly important. As the CorpCom person, I'm less invested in the search tool than the owner of the intranet is going to be, right? So I'll just clarify that part. In terms of the other part of your question, I mean, I don't know, Dan, you want to start on that one and I can pick up?
Oh, Viva Connections. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do use it at Microsoft. We have Viva Connections pre-installed and pinned in Teams, so it's there for all users to see. But I agree with John. I think generally speaking, our users are seeing things because they show up in their Teams activity feed or in their inbox.
Yeah, I mean, Connections, if you look at the UI, the news feed is coming off the MSW homepage, so there's a connection there. Most employees don't go to Connections to find that news feed. They go to MSW, the homepage. Connections, at least in Microsoft, I don't think has become a huge, at least from a CorpCom side again, is not a place that we think about a lot because I can't, as the CorpCom person, really control the content on that Connections feed super well, right? It's one feed now for every employee. That's not, you can't tailor a whole lot. Where the intranet, you can do a ton of customization too. And then the middle part of Connections is all the adaptive cards that are super meaningful to me as an individual. It's got my stock awards and my different tools I use internally. And the bottom part, some good links to resources. But again, as a CorpCom channel, not critical. For me, I hear more about it from a frontline worker standpoint. That's where I think it has a more useful value prop scenario. But again, at Microsoft, we don't have a lot of frontline workers or any frontline workers. So it's not a place I have to invest my time in. So that helps. Sorry. Yep.
Our corporate communications team still heavily relies on email communications.
Yeah.
And we've gone through like ServiceNow, MailChimp. I think now we're going to do staff-based.
We use staff-based too.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good to know.
Yep.
Is there any plans or any way that you would see like a Microsoft solution for some of those challenges?
You're channeling one of my questions. I don't know if I have the answer, and so others feel free to jump in on this one. I think what I'm hoping and what I'm pushing for is that Amplify in Viva picks up some of that work, right? The product is sort of, part of it is enabling you to send newsletters and emails to targeted audiences. So we are testing the use of Amplify to replace our use of staff-based in some scenarios. But just like any other company, we're having to test things in pilots before deploying them widely. So we're seeing some success with it. It has great built-in metrics. It's got the ability to send content to multiple endpoints to Amplify, but the layouts aren't great yet. And so for some of the emails that we send at the global level that are pretty graphics intensive and have a lot of content, Amplify I don't think is quite there yet. Although it'll be there eventually, and we're pushing the product team to get there on our side. So we do use we used Polite Mail for years. Now we use staff-based. I think, if I were to read the tea leaves in the future, my guess is it'll be Amplify, but we're on that journey of, trying things out and pushing for new features before the move takes place.
Hi there. Thanks
Hi.
for the great presentation.
Yeah.
My question is kind of along the lines of hers, is we're very focused on email too. How long did it take for your associates or employees to make that shift to that two-way communication on Viva Engage? And we do AMAs, but it's also very sporadic. So I'm just kind of wondering how long that transition was for that mindset shift, and if there were any other grassroots or organic efforts that you did to direct employees to use those channels.
Yeah, it's a great question. You're right, because again, you can't make this kind of change by snapping your fingers when you've had years and years of email being the way you reach employees. So I would say that there's a combination of things. Like, part of the power of managing this group called GEEC is that you can train all the comm staff at the same time. So when Engage was first coming out, we'd often bring Dan in to present to the GEEC community and say, hey, there's this new platform called Engage. Look at all the great things that it can do. And if you're used to Yammer and you didn't love Yammer, then, open mind, look at all the things this does that, Yammer couldn't do. And so you had Dan kind of sharing it with the comms team broadly. Then you had some comms leads that were early adopters and eager to try new things, that were leaning in and testing things out. And then I would then amplify their work to the rest of the GEEC community and say, look at what Sarah's done, isn't it incredible? Like, Sarah, tell us what you've done, how you did it, kind of thing, right? To encourage others to test it out. So that's part of the game, right? Is training all the comm staff, who really at Microsoft is doing all the comms work behind the scenes for the leaders. The other thing was, we had this moment in time where we had this very visible thing called the Satya Town Hall series that happened for 7.5 years. And we decided to stop doing it because it wasn't working, right? They were becoming too scripted, too inauthentic, and they weren't achieving the goal that Satya had for the program. So the head of comms from Microsoft went to Engage and posted to the whole company feed and said, we've heard your feedback, right? Like, you used to love this channel and now you don't. So we're going to stop doing it, and we're going to instead replace it with this company strat series. And starting today, we are asking all of our leaders to lean into two-way conversation. There's no one way to do that, so it'll look different for how you experience this, but starting today, like, that is the principle we're going after. And so that was putting a stake in the ground. That was June of 2022, right? So that was a really meaningful moment for comms, because it allowed every person in GEEC to then take that and then look at, okay, well, how am I going to do this? Like, do I do AMAs? Do I do my storyline for my leader? And that began this journey. And so I think, and then my team that manages the global stuff was able to push on the global side and say, if we do an all company email, we're not going to in the future. We're instead going to do an Engage post. And so by kind of hand-holding each of those teams that had those all company mail moments through this process, I think people have seen the value. And it's not hard to see the value. It's like Copilot. Once you look at it and you see all the data, the engagement, the reactions, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, why would you go back to email if you're getting more eyeballs, sentiment, traffic numbers, engagement, through a different tool with the same amount of work?
Yeah, and I want to underline one thing John implied in his comment, which is the adoption motion was the communicators, not the end users. One of the key things with using these tools is that you will reach the end users in Outlook, in Teams. They don't have to change their behavior at all. And one other thing that I keep telling his community, you have to also help your users know you want them to engage. They're used to having email with reply all turned off. So do what you see in consumer social media, which is finish your communication by saying, what questions do you have? What have been your experiences? Ask for engagement and actively say, I want input from you, because otherwise people will take a while to really realize that that's happening.
I have a quick question about, I feel like a couple conferences, I came to the conference 2 years ago, talking all about kind of this single pane of glass kind of approach with Teams. It seemed like it'd be, the Viva Connections, it was more of an investment in. We know most people are in Teams. That's definitely true with our company. Everybody's in Teams and email, and I think you kind of just talked to that. My question is, with Viva Engage, does it feed it? So I'm just thinking, I see it on my phone, like we have it on mobile, and I see a feed if I go to the connections.
Yep.
I kind of have the dashboard, the feed. On desktop, it's more of just our intranet site. But is the idea that there would be a feed from Teams as well with Engage? Does Engage just come right? Like, what does it look like in Teams, where they're getting their info from Engage?
The Engage content shows up a couple of ways in Teams. First, if it's targeted to you, meaning it's an announcement or it's an announcement from one of your leaders or from a community you're in, you'll see it in your activity feed. So it's just going to be right there along with chats and all those kinds of things. The second way it expresses itself today is you can deploy and pin the Engage app in your users' the app bar on the left. And when they go there, the first thing they'll see is the home feed, which is the Engage home feed that brings the most relevant content. So those are the two ways it expresses itself in Teams today. And we're working across teams to provide more. So I think the next time you come to this conference, we'll have some really exciting stuff that will have happened in the meantime. We know we really are committed to Teams and Outlook being hubs where people can spend their days working, and everything should come to them rather than users having to go to 10 different places to get stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I know I think we're over time, and it's lunchtime too, so. But thank you for having me. This is great to be here. I appreciate the conversation. I'm around for questions as well.
Thank you so much,
you.
John.